Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Hellaway, CEO of digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is October 30th, 2012, and this is episode number 43.
In this episode, we're going to discuss the difference in smartphone and tablet usage, Yelp adding photos to their online menus, Yahoo puts a big emphasis on mobile, how to debug your Facebook page, how to verify your Pinterest profile, and lots more. How's it going there, Corey?
Going well, it's going well. Lots more, lots on the plate today. Always a good week. Excited about today's episode?
Yeah, we have, there's a couple new things that popped up, especially the number stuff that we'll be talking about initially, and then a lot of things that we kind of been keeping tucked away a little bit so that we could put them all together a couple shows back. We just had a little overflow with some of the older shows, so now we can finally get to them.
We've got an abundance of social media and social loco content, so it's time to catch up. Do a little bit of digging into the vaults and some of the stories that we've been saving. And hey, we've been keeping them around. It's for good reason. They're good stuffs.
So let's dive into the first thing, Corey.
All right, this is a blog post coming out of Flurry. Flurry is an application statistics company. I believe they actually work with application developers. If you're creating a mobile application, you can add the Flurry system. It'll give you analytics on your app, who's using it, what type of data they're using, that sort of thing. And then they're actually able to aggregate all of that and create some of the data that they've shared publicly. And so what they put out recently was a study on the difference in usage between smartphones and tablets. So we all know that the smartphone tablet world continues to evolve and continues to push people more and more mobile. But how did the two actually compare in terms of younger versus older? Who's using the tablet more? Who's using a smartphone more? When you're on that tablet, what type of things are you doing? How often are you on your tablet versus your smartphone? That type of thing. So really interesting data, a lot of good stuff. I think it's definitely a reliable source. Flurry, like I said, has a lot of close ties with a lot of application developers, so they're really getting some interesting data here. So diving right into the first thing is age distribution in terms of smartphone versus tablet usage. And what's interesting is 13 through 17, the younger generation, it's really split. Smartphones and tablets are dead even. But then when you get into that sort of high school, college age, 18 to 24, there's a much higher percentage of smartphones, and that continues into the 25 through 34 category. But then you start to see tablets catch up and actually pass. So in the 35 to 54-year-old category, tablet usage is actually higher than smartphone usage. And in the 55 plus category, tablet usage is more than double smartphone usage. So tablet adoption has been incredibly fast inside of that older demographic. So really interesting. If you're, on a mobile or tablet marketing push, depending on what your audience is, might dictate which one of those devices you want to target. If you are really focused on mobile, that's going to work better for a younger demographic. If you're trying to reach that older demographic, you might want to consider doing something with tablets, whether it's because it's easier to read, the eyes get a little old, it's hard to see some of that text that happens on a smartphone versus a tablet, or might be some other reasons as well, but it is interesting to just keep in mind that the different age demographics do use devices differently.
But you are spot on with the eyesight thing, and I say that with actually having heard a number of folks talk about. It was just even a couple weeks ago where somebody said that actually it was a friend of ours that we know. I won't say the name to let his grandmother hear it, but he said that he had got her a tablet, and for the first time in years, she's actually reading, and she takes the size of the text and she increases it huge. So, to get through a standard paper page of a book, it might be 5 swipes across the tablet to get through that page. But that's because the size of the typography is so big, it makes it easier for them to read. So the smaller form factor of a smartphone is definitely limiting, and those folks aren't necessarily mobile in the sense of running about town and doing that and the other and wanting to use their smartphone to check up on things. And I think additionally, tablets have become a good gateway computing device for folks who may not have otherwise even had a PC in their home as well. So it's definitely a gateway and replacement device for their PCs.
The other thing that's interesting is, as you mentioned, it's a replacement for the PC. So they get into a little bit of where people are using these. And so during the day, as you'd expect, anywhere from 9 a.m. to about 5 p.m., smartphones are more popular than tablets. More people are using them. It's because you're out and about, you're at work, you're on the go, you're more likely to reach for your smartphone. But then from about 6 p.m. onward to even through midnight, there's actually a very sharp increase in tablet usage to the point where it overtakes smartphone usage. So we've mentioned this a number of times in the past, that idea of the second screen device. When you're sitting down, you're on your couch, maybe you've got the TV on, you're much more likely at this point to pull out a tablet and start to do more of a browsing usage versus smartphone where you're more task-oriented. And that's backed up by the data we see here. So again, something to keep in mind. If you are putting a campaign out there that's going to target tablets, it's not something that's going to work well if you're trying to target somebody in the middle of the day. It needs to be a little bit more casual. It needs to be in that cool down after work time when you're just looking to relax. And at the same time, you're also a little more willing to, browse around and find new things, and you're not in as much of a rushed atmosphere as during the day where you're reaching for your smartphone, you want to get in and out. So I thought that data was interesting, and I was kind of surprised by how sharply the increase in tablets was. Basically, as soon as people are off work, those tablets come out and they start getting used pretty heavily. Anything else in this study stand out for you, Adam? Kind of surprising numbers or things that reaffirmed your previously held beliefs?
I mean, it all, for the most part, reaffirms things that I thought when I was looking at each of the charts, because there's, I think 4 or 5 of them here. They all kind of, I was like, yep, that feels just about right. I mean, even the usage by hour of the day, I think that really actually mimics my usage. And it's not like I'm running around busy in the sense of running out and about town with my mobile device. And it still very much mimics that. I think based on some of the other information that we see in here, it's likely that we'll probably see a little bit of a rise in the tablets during the day as people start to use their tablets a little bit more as productivity devices and things that augment what they do at work throughout the day. I would say the smartphones at the moment throughout the day are likely being used not just for professional reasons, but because they can kind of run that dual role of professional and personal throughout the day. And it's not practical to walk around with a tablet under your arm per se, as you're doing things throughout your normal daily routine. That's why we won't really see that's why there's the difference currently with the smartphone and the tablets that we're seeing throughout those core times.
They get a little bit into the time spent per category in terms of apps, though I'm a little questioning of this data because it doesn't include things like checking email, which I've got to imagine is a pretty significant part of smartphone usage. They clump things into social networking, utilities, games. I don't know if utilities includes email. If so, that percentage seems a little low, but both of them are actually dominated by game playing, but tablet much more so. So smartphones, they said 39% of the time people are using their smartphones for games, versus tablets, actually 67 or 2/3 of all tablet usage is dedicated towards games. So you're sitting down, you're more likely to be playing something a little more immersive versus on a smartphone, again, where you're really data-driven, you're using more of the utilities, more of the social networking apps. But again, I question that data a little bit because I'm not seeing things like email that I would expect to see on a smartphone chart. But
that one is the time spent per category that you were just talking about. Did surprise me a bit of just how much games increased from one over the other. You just said 39% on smartphones with 67% on tablets. That did seem a little bit high for me. But then again, I've seen my mom and how she uses her iPad, and that's basically become the de facto device for her to do things like play what would be normally Facebook social games and all those things that folks are playing as well. So if that is a cross section of other folks her age that are, sitting there and using those devices for those sorts of things, then I guess that would be appropriate for these numbers.
Yeah, and we've got plenty more mobile-oriented stories coming up, so I think we should dive right into our first main topic of the day.
All right.
And this is actually a pretty interesting topic. So it follows very closely on the heels of something we discussed previously, which was both Food Spotting and Foursquare really focusing their efforts on this idea of exploring and discovery and finding new things. And now we find out that Yelp is also shifting their focus a little bit to really narrow discovery and kind of gathering this data and then displaying it in unique ways. So what they've done is added the ability for customers and users of Yelp to submit photos of specific menu items. And if you tag that photo with the description of that item, it'll actually get associated with a menu item that the restaurant has added to their Yelp description.
Food spotting in reverse.
Food spotting in reverse, exactly. It's basically what food spotting is, but done by Yelp and done as part of Yelp service. So Yelp, I think this was a recent addition. They actually allowed restaurants to go into their Yelp profile and add their entire menu. This includes, each item. You can include a description of that item. You can include even the cost for that item, really creating a digital version of that menu. And it's definitely useful. We've talked in the past about how the more information you can get into a single app, the more time people are going to spend in that app. But the thing it was kind of missing is that visual element. Yelp has always focused on photos, but some people took a photo of the outside of the restaurant. Some people took a photo of just the interior decorations. Some people would snap a picture of their meal. What they're really putting the focus on now, though, is photos of individual food items, much like Food Spotting has done. And so, again, you're a user, you're collecting photos of your food, you're submitting it into Yelp, and then Yelp is actually automatically associating those with the menu and kind of creating what we talked about with...
Was it last week we had that video with the Instagram menu, and we talked about how they could have kind of done a cooler job, but this restaurant was using the Instagram photos and trying to tell people that they should use those in order to help them decide and discover dishes that their friends and others have taken photos of. This is kind of almost in a way playing on that idea that we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. It's what we were describing when we were breaking apart that idea before and saying, hey, if we would have improved it, here's how. Well, 1 week later, Yelp has gone and done that for us. So
it must have been listening to the show, I think, is what it is.
I think so. And quick to respond, I must say. Within a week, they developed it, rolled it out, did some PR. Very impressed by their speed. But I do think it's interesting. It seems to me like I don't know, it's a bold move because the easy move would have been to partner with Food Spotting and say, look, you've got great pictures of food. I'm not really that impressed with a lot of the Yelp photos that I see, to be honest. Food Spotting, I always go on there and I'm like, oh man, the people that do Food Spotting, they're very passionate about their photos. They take great photos. A lot of times I look at Yelp and I'm like, it's like a blurry picture. It looks like it was taken on somebody's Motorola Razr. The lighting's weird. It's not the most appetizing photos. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, do I want to see a whole menu full of these really unappetizing photos?
That's the scary part, right? Is the fact that you've got this kind of somewhat official, I mean, it is user generated listing in Yelp, and now you're having you're essentially creating this menu and saying, this is how much this particular item costs on our menu. And it's turning into a digital menu, but it's using these photos that could end up being really, really scary and unappetizing and influence people to not actually purchase that dish simply because of that. It's like having, a YouTube video generated from somebody somehow be your marketing video. It's aggregating the experiences and making them almost in a way official or seem associated with an official presence. And there's some scary things that could happen if somebody puts up the wrong video. You don't have you don't have a good sense of quality control in that area.
I think the idea of sharing data isn't that far out of the realm of possibility. We've even talked previously about how Foursquare and Food Spotting have really teamed up. They're not necessarily competing directly in this space. Foursquare said, hey, we've got the check-ins and you've got the pictures of food. Let's combine those two. And so it's actually a feature that I've turned on inside of my own Foursquare app. When I check into, you as well. When I check into a restaurant, it automatically updates me with the most popular Food Spotting recommendations. So it says, hey, why don't you try the ribs, or why don't you try the macaroni and cheese? It's the most popular item on Food Spotting. And Yelp is going to do something different, Yelp is going to do something similar in that when you check into Yelp and, you're sort of telling Yelp, hey, I'm at this restaurant, they're going to highlight photos of food that have been liked or recommended by the most users. And they're even pulling in other data. So they're not just taking photos. They're also saying, well, this specific menu item was mentioned in, 20% of the reviews. We're going to assume, therefore, that that's probably a popular menu item. So, Foursquare and Food Spotting, they're doing one thing over here where they're teaming up and trying to get the best of both worlds. And it feels like Yelp is really, rather than partnering, they're saying, hey, we're going to go at this all on our own, and we're going to see if we can get, information that kind of takes on both of your services at once. So let
me ask you, Corey. I want to ask you. So So have you ever used the photos in Yelp, or do you use Yelp often in the experience when you're choosing, say, a restaurant and then ultimately choosing a dish at that restaurant?
I haven't for dishes. I've occasionally used it just to get a sense for what type of restaurant it is. So if I'm going somewhere new, I'll look at the photos and hopefully there's enough that I can get a sense for it. But it gives you a feeling of, is this a fancy place? Is this a more casual place? How many seats are in the building? Is there a big bar? That type of thing. I've never used it for specific menu items. And again, it's, I think they didn't really put the focus on specific menu items before. They just said, upload whatever photos you want, and it kind of gets aggregated into one big bucket. So I'm kind of wondering how they're going to incentivize users to focus more on specific dishes and not just random photos. That's yet to be seen, but I guess they're going to, because it seems like this is really a big play for them to try to build up not just a check-in service and not just a review service, but also kind of a whole digital solution to going out to a restaurant. They're going to help you find a restaurant. They're going to help you find a meal. They're going to help you share that restaurant. They're going to help you review it after the fact. It's from beginning to end, Yelp wants to be your solution.
Well, and the reason I ask that is a couple of reasons. So one, when we talk about kind of Foursquare as the competitor to this, it's been, a year and a half that Foursquare said they were going to add menus to their locations. And I always thought that was a bit incomplete, because when you use the menu, there was never photos. And sometimes, it's the difference between going to a restaurant and seeing it all with just text, and you have no clue, especially when you go to a Thai restaurant or a restaurant that's using its native language, and you have a really big menu, and you're used to the 2 or 3 things like pad Thai or something like that you've ordered in the past, and they have in all those other restaurants. But sometimes that photo just makes all the difference when you're looking at something to kind of allow you to explore and discover something new. So I always thought this was a bit of a missed opportunity, that there were not photos on the menus in Foursquare. And then, of course, they partnered with Food Spotting. And lately, when I do check in, I do see a Food Spotting specific little call out that says, try this dish at where you just checked in. It is the most popular one, and it's most popular based on Food Spotting data. Whereas with Yelp recently, my wife and I ended up going to some other, I think it was a Thai place or something. It was brand spanking new. I didn't know what I wanted to order. It was a little bit different than the other Thai places I had been to. And in looking for the place in the first place using Yelp, I started to go through the photos to see what kind of food. And you kind of sometimes can base, if you think the place is going to be great, based on if the food looks that it's, of quality and presented well. And as I looked through, it was the users that were actually the smart ones that were actually captioning those photos with the name of the dish at the time. Or else I would never have known what to do other than to say, show the photo to the waiter and say, I want one of these. And in fact, it did influence my decision to purchase the dish at the time over there. And so I think that is the interesting way that they're going here with Yelp. And Yelp is actually, so we still don't have this Food Spotting photos connected directly to prices, so that you can actually even now say, okay, I don't know, maybe I don't want to buy this because it's too expensive or it's not within my price range or whatever. But if we look at this blog post that we'll be linking to on our show notes, you'll actually see that they juxtapose the price for that item next to the photo and next to the dish name. And so they're kind of in a way completing the circle a little bit, even though they're doing it based on user generated photos. They're not going out and getting official data from anywhere. So that's why I wanted to ask you that. It was an experience that I had recently, and it sounds like Foursquare has been influencing or at least helping you maybe think about some new dishes that it see because of their food spotting integration.
Yeah. The other thing that I think Yelp's going to have to overcome, so we mentioned the fact that people aren't necessarily taking pictures of specific menu items yet, unlike food spotting, where that's really the norm. People on Yelp tend to share, here's my entire plate, not here's this menu, here's that menu item, here's that menu item. The other thing I think they're going to have to overcome is the idea that I'm not sure the Yelp check-in feature has really taken off in the way that Foursquare has. So Yelp users, sure, you're going there to check out a restaurant, and some people are also going to check in, and the check-in gets added to your review if you later review the restaurant. But I don't know that people think of Yelp as something that you would check in order to get additional information. It's kind of something you're doing just as part of your experience because, hey, I check in using Foursquare, I check in using Yelp, it's just something that I do, but you're not yet thinking to yourself, oh, I should check in to see menu items, to see the prices, to see, what I want to order, because you're there already. You're sitting down, you're picking up the menu and kind of going off of that. So I'm not quite sure, maybe this check-in is something that a lot of people are doing and I just haven't seen it, but in my own personal experience, my own personal network, the Yelp check-in definitely is not as popular as the Foursquare check-in. Does that jive with what you've seen?
Yeah, it does jive with what I've seen, and it's almost like everybody who has very similar business models is trying to add all those features, especially something like a check-in, which is really easy to add. Whereas again, Foursquare went this direction. Yelp went this direction, kind of both crossing paths to some extent in certain areas. But we have a question actually from a live listener who was asking, Dawn was asking, do you think that the photos on Yelp suck because they are simply out having fun, people drinking, just kind of enjoying themselves, and that taking a photo is really kind of their second priority, is second nature, versus maybe something like, I don't know, and I'd be interested, Don, in what you think about this. The more, what do you want to call it? I heard the term today, food porn enthusiasts that want to really focus on getting that nice shot, and they're more of those sorts of they really think about that food shot before they add it to something like a food spotting, and by default then made accessible on Foursquare. What do you think, Corey?
I do. I definitely agree with that. So I think that the people who, and this was something that existed even before food spotting just gave it a home, but people would, go out to a really nice meal and they would want to kind of document it and remember it and share it with friends. And then if you were the type of person that really enjoyed that, you thought to yourself, I really like sharing these stories, sharing the meals that I'm having, getting very specific about each individual food item that I'm ordering. You went out and looked for tools and you found food spotting and you found a happy home. Food spotting is a great network. We've talked about it. There's tons of users, tons of activity. If you took great photos, you got a lot of digital pats on the back for that, and people would, like your photo and you'd become more popular on food spotting. So I think people that like taking those photos found a home on food spotting, and yes, maybe they'd also submit it to Yelp if they got around to it, but I think it's definitely a different type of user than the Yelp user who's out to really talk about the entire experience of a restaurant. Yelp reviews aren't just about the food, it's about the service and about the atmosphere and about the, waiter that talked to you for 10 minutes about your wine and all that stuff that, goes beyond just individual food items. And so I think that a Yelp photo is more of that, hey, here's me out having a good time, and here's the restaurant in general, not just here's some food porn of this very specific thing that I ordered. So,
well, then does that mean then it brings up the question that now that Yelp has provided, of course, food spotting provided focus on the food. So now that Yelp has provided kind of a higher pedestal to view that food on, and it shines a little bit more, again, it's not only food photos, it's photos of the front of the place, it's photos of people that work there, it's photos of whatever is mixed in there. But now that food is, those food items are specifically being added to a menu and it's being highlighted more, that maybe it'll change the behavior a little bit, or the effort that people put into shooting photos at using Yelp?
I think it might. I think that, maybe with this focus, the people who are on food spotting, especially the people that are putting a lot of effort towards food spotting, might also integrate Yelp into that process. So maybe they post to both. Maybe they take their food spotting photos and later add it to Yelp with some captions about which type of meal it was. Again, a lot of people are kind of seeking out that digital or virtual pat on the back. And so if they can get it on food spotting and they can also get it on Yelp, I think that they're likely to do that. It'll be interesting to see if Yelp evolves in that sense or if this just gets added on as a new behavior. But, I think it's interesting. I like what they're doing here. They're, again, trying to be your one-stop shop from very beginning to very end of your meal. But there are other competitors in the space that are focused on each individual aspect and, potentially doing that one aspect better while they don't do the rest of it. So, it'll be kind of a battle between the one-stop shop or the individual services that focus on one part of your dining experience. The last thing that I wanted to throw in here real quick, because it is an interesting variable, is that Apple's new Maps application pulls a lot of data from Yelp. And so we talked about this when we first looked at the Apple Maps application and the fact that their photos were automatically coming over from Yelp. And, Apple has sort of made a lot of partnerships to make their maps happen. And so I think what we might start seeing is people searching for restaurants inside of Apple Maps, which we know is going to be popular to the tune of, 500 million searches over the course of a single week. So a lot of people doing searches for restaurants, and the photos that are going to start to populate those map results may be more food oriented when you're looking at a restaurant. So it'll be interesting to see if Apple does pull in those photos, how they get ranked, how they get prioritized. But I think that could be something that really, again, puts a big focus on some of these food photos that get shared on Yelp, and could also be something that encourages people who take those photos to add them to Yelp in hopes of kind of appearing on the maps results and getting their time to shine in the spotlight.
So a couple follow-up comments from Dawn, who's listening to us and is tweeting in her comments. She said, Yelp is not the place to rely on quality photos. I never select an entree or even place to go based on photos. If it were a food or, / restaurant place only so she's talking about Yelp. She said, if it were a food or restaurant site only, I could see photos meaning more. Food spotting is the place for real foodies, in her opinion. So how do you think people who are in the restaurant business or people that have food items to sell, what do you think that they should do? We keep kind of putting a little bit more stock in what food spotting is doing and how it's tied to Foursquare. But because now there's this with Yelp, what do you say, Corey? What do you think that the company that businesses should do?
At the very least, you've got to get in there and add your menu. So even without photos getting taken into account, adding your menu makes a lot of sense. If people are going to look up your restaurant and they're finding positive reviews, by all means, make sure your menu's right there so they can say, oh, I'm seeing these great reviews. Oh, and look, there's this great looking entree. I definitely want to go. I want to order that. I want to check it out. So make sure your menu is up to date, include descriptions, include pricing even, because like you said, it's one thing to say, oh, that looks great, but it's another to say, oh, that looks great, and it's within my budget. Let's, head out tonight and check that out. So add your menu, make sure that data is up to date, and then I would say give it a little bit of time, because Yelp is actually doing a lot of the work for you. They're going to match captions to your menu items. They're going to try to match previous reviews to your menu items. So, I would kind of wait and see how things shake out. Again, it is going to require a little bit of a shift in current user behavior. So if that shift happens, great. You've got additional data on your Yelp review. If that shift doesn't happen, then hey, no loss there. You've got your menu that has added benefits inside of Yelp. And if you don't get a lot of photos, so what? At least you've got other things there that people can check out. So I would say update your menu, get that there, and then do a little bit of wait and see to see how this plays out and whether the Yelp audience actually adapts to that behavior.
I'd say maybe even encourage people to take photos of the food, because there are just some businesses that folks just haven't been that eager to take photos, because that's not the first thing that they think of when it comes to leaving a Yelp review is, contributing a photo. So I think encouraging folks to include a photo on Yelp also matters very much. And I think, in fact, you said that when we were talking about initially the Apple Maps release, and regardless of being food or not, that, of course, because those photos were starting to be higher profile on Apple Maps, that it was something that folks might consider reaching out to their community and saying, let's get them to take photos and get them to take, appealing ones. Again, even if they're not restaurants.
Yeah, I don't know though. The actual photographing of food is a little bit trickier though. So a lot of people, you could go into a building, you could take a picture of the interior, and hey, you can kind of get a feeling for what's going on with it. But if you get the wrong lighting and the wrong details around a steak or a whole plate of food, that might actually look unappealing, and that might drive people away from your restaurant. So maybe it's trying to reach out to specific users that you've noticed take great photos of neighboring restaurants. They're in the area. Maybe you could try to reach out to those and say, hey, I noticed you take great photos. I'll offer you a free meal if you want to just document it and put it out to your audience.
I will bribe you with food. It's always the way to do it.
Bribe you with food, exactly. But I would be a little cautious of just saying, come one, come all, everybody take really awkwardly lit photos of the meals we're trying to serve, because that might not work out the way you want it to.
So we did say that we were going to talk about more mobile stuff. And although the Yelp stuff is related to what they got going on their mobile sites as well as their desktop sites, Yahoo's doing a little something with a company that I hadn't even heard of before. They say Yahoo goes mobile and actually acquires or Acqui-Hires a company called Stamped. Can you describe what Stamped was and did, Corey?
Yeah, I'll describe it really quickly because, as you mentioned, it's what Stamped used to do. They're actually shutting down the service and moving on to a new project. The quote from Stamped is, "We're excited to start work again on something big, mobile, and new, but we can't discuss the details just yet." So something big's coming from Yahoo, courtesy of the Stamped folks. They just can't talk about it. But what Stamped is an iOS app that allowed you to review or put your stamp of approval on just about anything. So it was a mobile-focused app. It had some really neat interface touches. It was definitely an attractive app. It was pretty easy to use, but you could review anything. So if you wanted to, you could go to a restaurant and review specific dishes and say, I give my stamp of approval to this, rack of ribs or this thing of macaroni and cheese. You could stamp that. And then if others came and they also stamped that, it would be highlighted as the most popular item at that restaurant. Or I stamp my iPhone 5 because I really like my iPhone 5. You could stamp just about anything. It collected all of your stamps together, so if you loaded up the Corey O'Brien stamped profile, you could see all the things that I had liked and given my stamp of approval to. But that's no more. Now Stamped has been acqui-hired by Yahoo. They're joining up, and it's part of a big shift that Yahoo is making towards a mobile company. So Marissa Mayer, the recent CEO addition to Yahoo, was actually quoted as saying, "Our top priority is a focused, coherent mobile strategy. At some point in the near future, we will have to be a predominantly mobile company." And I put emphasis on have to be because I think it's a very interesting choice of words. They're not saying we want to be, they're saying we have to be. There is a shift in the way that people are interacting with content, and Yahoo is a content company. They're a content and advertising company. And so they're saying that if they want to be around in 5 years, they have to make the shift to mobile because that's just where users are going. So making smart acquisitions like this, I think, is a solid move. It'll be interesting to see what project is coming out of this because, they didn't just say, oh, well, we like Stamped. We'll just have Stamped and say brought to you by Yahoo at the bottom and let it keep going. They actually had apparently either their own idea or the Stamped folks had an idea that Yahoo was getting on board with, but it's something big, something tremendous coming soon. So, will be interesting to see what they're doing, but it does seem like Yahoo has identified mobile as a big focus for their company and is already making big steps towards that. So do you think this is a smart move by Yahoo? Is it sort of a natural evolution of their company strategy? Or does this seem like they're a little bit heading in all sorts of directions and, just trying to grab at anything they can to find some success?
I don't think it's just kind of them grasping at straws. I mean, I think initially it felt a little weird when they acquired Into Now, which is a kind of a second screen experience application. In fact, when Into Now came out, it was really quite innovative. If you use something like Shazam on your phone, where it listens to sounds or songs specifically, and then tells you what song that it was that you were just listening to, you might not have known the artist, you might have not have known the song, but it was able to listen to it with your phone and then detect it and tell you. Into Now was doing something very similar, but doing it for television shows and kind of tagging you as saying you just watch that show simply based on listening to that show in real time, and then identifying it, and even down to the episode. And that seemed a little awkward at first, like, really, why would Yahoo do that? And then as you start to see it play into what they're doing, because they're tied to entertainment, for instance, at Yahoo. They have a big presence with all their content and media networks that they're tied to the experience of entertainment, and how this all feeds into providing them some data on that and tying into other things they're likely doing on Yahoo. It made sense. And Marissa Mayer showed, and I think it was something where she was talking about how many of their products they were going to cut and how many of their products they were going to keep. And the ones that they said they were going to focus on, which I think were like 5 or 6 core ones, was included Into Now, which is a predominantly mobile platform, a predominantly mobile application. And so I did think, like you said, you called out where they said we will have to be a predominantly mobile company. That have to is kind of telling. And I think that they're going the same route with whether they come out with a very Stamped-like application, because they could have just acquired Stamped, and if they thought Stamped on its own was enough, they would have just kept kept pushing and investing into that. But there must be something Stamped-like, and I could see how it could feed into another very interesting application on a mobile device that would give them a lot of interesting data around commerce, around things that people actually want to spend money on. And so although it's not what we think of for Yahoo in the past, I think we're seeing that Yahoo has been starting to shift that direction a little bit more in the future. And even more telling, beyond Yahoo specifically, it is showing that mobile is, if you're not thinking about mobile, whether it be advertising on mobile, creating an app on mobile, having some sort of presence that's optimized for mobile, then you're missing out. And people right now are skipping. They're not playing catch up anymore, where they're catching up to things that have been done over the last 3 years. They're skipping all those things and going directly to saying we need to be thinking about the future. And the future is not on desktops predominantly. It's going to be, just like we covered at the beginning of this episode, tablet and smartphone driven.
It is interesting. You said that Stamped could go in a number of different directions, which I think is correct. So, like I said, you could review almost anything, which means that Yahoo can then take that idea and really focus it. So it could be a Yelp competitor. It could be a food spotting competitor. It could be a Amazon.com review competitor. It could be a number of things, but we know it's going to be mobile. And I think that's interesting. And the idea that something new and something big, they're not saying, hey, we're going to,
But they all say that. They all say that,
They do all say that, but I think this is a big acquisition. I don't think they're, going to acquire something like this just to create a knockoff of Foursquare or a knockoff of Yelp. They're hopefully taking it in new directions. They're trying to find, untapped markets. I think for Yahoo, a company the size of Yahoo, to succeed, they can't just create catch-up applications. They can't say, oh, well, this one worked well. We'll try to scrape some of that audience into our own version of it. They have to really find new opportunities. And, I think that is true for a lot of companies. Mobile represents a new opportunity, and you can't just say, oh, well, we'll kind of copy somebody else and hope to do it a little cheaper. You've got to think of this as a chance to really find some unique directions that you could take your company in, unique focuses that you can have, and hopefully find a big opportunity as the mobile market continues to grow.
Do you think, and funny enough, we still have Dawn riding along with us here and giving some good comments on Twitter. And she said, given my experience with Y, which I assume means Yahoo and not me, as in you, would say that they are heading in many different directions to see what sticks. Do you think that they're going the direction? We've heard some other companies doing this. Even eBay has kind of verbally stated this in some of their PR efforts recently, to say that they have to think of themselves as a startup. And therefore, they're, and we're starting to veer into the technology side and the business side rather than the marketing side. but that they're kind of in a way, investing in many different areas and investing their money in a way to say, like, we'll spin the wheel and we have 10 different options and let's see which one of them works, and we're willing to let a few of them die along the way. I personally don't think so. I think that they, as well as some of these other companies like Facebook and Google and so on, are doing their best to really acquire things that they really feel strongly are going to benefit the end user and ultimately their brand in the long run.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be a startup as much as a VC. So they're placing a lot of small bets, they're seeing what sticks, and then putting a lot of focus behind that. And that's, like you said, with Into Now. They saw that, they said, all right, well, we're going to acquire this, we're going to see what happens. And it turned out they liked it, response was good, and so they put more focus into it, and they really built that out. It is a little bit like a startup in that they're, bringing these people on, starting from the ground up and building something new. They're not just acquiring it and rebranding it. So, they are acting a little bit like, hey, let's get a bunch of really big talent in a room, let's set them free and let's see what happens. But, I think that they have to make a lot of small bets and see what sticks. They can't just say, all right, well, Yahoo, we're putting all our focus on Into Now. I think that they, again, because of their size of their company, they have to find a number of different areas to move into, not just one to move into in a big way.
I agree.
All right, Adam, so tool review of the day. You had a interesting tool review. This is something that I'd played around with a little bit, but wanted to hear your thoughts on the Facebook debugger. Definitely something that I think it's a little bit unknown that Facebook even has this functionality, but what's your thoughts on the Facebook debugger and how people can use it to maybe make their pages work a little harder for them?
Sure. So in most cases, folks really want people to share their content or their pages on Facebook. But in many cases, I've also heard people be really quite frustrated at what ends up being shared when somebody shares a link to a particular page or product or service or anything online. An image might not show up properly, or it might grab a different image than what they want. The heading or the description might be a little awkward. And there are reasons behind that. And so the Facebook debugger is something that we often rely on at my company at Secret Sushi in order to really help us. It helps us figure out a few things. So the way that Facebook works is for Google, even though it's not Google proprietary code, we always want to make sure things like meta tags and keywords and things like that are in the page so that those things would be properly indexed. And we know that SEO goes beyond just simply having the proper keywords and meta tags and titles and so on in your page. But Facebook looks at those elements, but you can be very specific on what you want Facebook to share and show by default for people by having something called Open Graph data and Open Graph tags inside the head of your code in your web page. So some of this that I'm trying to talk about here is things that your developer might do for you, but at the same time, and we'll share a link to this tool in our show notes so you can play around with it a little bit. But sometimes if you just want to see what Facebook sees initially when you share a post, you can take any URL to pretty much anything on the web, and you can copy and paste it in and click the little blue button that says debug, and it will actually spit out a bunch of stuff. Some of it will be hard to understand, and some of it will be pretty straightforward. What I recommend is looking at the information that pops specifically that says object properties. And what it'll show is what actually is the title that will be displayed when it gets shared on Facebook. What, if any, image is going to be displayed when it gets shared on Facebook, and what is the description that it's going to pull in and put on there as well. And so when you share something on Facebook, you usually see that. You see a thumbnail of something, you see a title, which ends up being the thing that people can click on, and then you end up seeing this little body of copy at the bottom that is a description, could be long or short. And I'm a big proponent of socially optimizing your content, and you want to socially optimize it for Twitter and for other places it gets shared as well. But socially optimizing it for Facebook is very, very important for most sites, just simply because it's the behemoth social network. And so a couple things. One, you can use it to test out your page and see what is Facebook actually seeing by default when you put a link and pop it into there. That's one thing. Secondly, sometimes what happens is you'll make a change to a page on your website, But you'll see that when you share it on Facebook, you'll still see the previous information on the page from, say, a page that you just finished changing. It was this way and had this sort of information in this data for a year, and then suddenly you've updated that page, but for some reason Facebook, whenever you share it, is still referencing the old page. What this debugger does is very simple, similar to clearing the cache on your browser, if you're familiar with that, where when you go into your browser and you hit F5 and refresh, then it clears out anything that it kind of cached and stored onto your browser and gets the newest version of that page. Well, Facebook, when the first person shares that particular page on Facebook, Facebook actually caches that information and leaves it sitting in there and knows whenever another person shares from that page, it just grabs that same information that it had previously and displays it up there. If you make changes and you need to flush that cache out, you need to come over to this debugger and you need to flush it out by just simply putting that URL in and hitting the debug button, and that process will actually just clear out the old stuff and let Facebook know that there's new information there again. So there's those two really big reasons to use it. Number one, to look at what is actually being shared with your page, and it gives you some advice on how to fix that. And it may be something you hand off to your developer to kind of finish off and finalize. And then B, if you've already optimized it, but then you've changed that page in a significant way, and you want the new information to be displayed, and you keep seeing the old stuff, you use it to actually flush out Facebook's cache and show the most recent version of that page, which can be really frustrating for folks. And it's one of the few things that Facebook provides that really gives you some insight into how content is shared on their network, because a lot of other networks don't have that available. And in fact, beyond that, Facebook's developer stuff is really difficult to work with. It's not the most user-friendly stuff. So I really think that people should take a look at this if they can, or at least get their developers to use it when it comes to checking out their website and the content you want to share.
All right. Well, Adam, I hope you get a quick chance to catch your breath, because I'm about to put you on the spot for the lightning round.
All right. We're ready to go. We're ready to go.
So, lightning round, we're going to cover 3 stories, and we will both, Adam and I, will both get 60 seconds each to give our take on the first story. So, 60 seconds is on the clock, and first up is Adam's take on video ads inside of LinkedIn. Ready and go.
Oh, my take. All right. So LinkedIn recently announced that previously they had just display ads that you could go ahead and purchase, and now they've made available video ads, and they are 300 by 250 pixel units, and they're very similar to the current ads, except they pretty much are video. And they talked about how you can even use YouTube videos in the ads, and they'll actually get tracked along with your standard YouTube analytics. My take on this is that if you're a B2B company, YouTube is the place to be, and YouTube is a great place to show off a product you might want to share with a B2B company, or some sort of event that you might have going on or something, and to leverage and turning it into, say, a 20-second or 30-second trailer or demonstration, I think would be really, really useful. So for those sorts of companies, I'd say you take a look at the LinkedIn ads. We'll have the link in the show notes.
All right. 3 seconds to go, saving us from the lightning round sound. 60 seconds back on the clock. Ready and go. So I do think this is interesting. And originally I was like, 300 by 250 video ads on LinkedIn, not that cool. Yes, it's LinkedIn, it's a different channel, but hey, it's just a banner ad. But I was trying to think of an interesting use case for this, and I came up with a couple. So real quick, one would be, if you're a restaurant, you're thinking to yourself, well, LinkedIn's not the place for me, but maybe you could advertise your restaurant as a great place to have meetings. I know a lot of the restaurants around my office space, lunchtime, they are packed with people in suits having very important looking meetings. So this could be a great chance to put a little 30-second ad up and say, hey, look here, you can have a comfy booth, you can have a quiet conversation with that person you're about to fire. Come check out my restaurant. The other opportunity is, looking at, again, Adam said B2B. I think that that's great. Even if you're like a service company, this is also a good opportunity. So, a lot of ways to reach companies, target individual types of people. You can target high net worth type folks. So, find interesting opportunities.
I love that. Actually, in the use of, like, saying come and use it for a meeting space, or you're tired of work and come on over and visit us. I think those are all awesome, awesome. I think that just doing that whole thing of come bring the person you're about to fire, that like would probably gain enough attention that it would just be funny and entertaining for folks. So cool, I like it.
That's a freebie from the SoLoMo show. If you use that and you have some success with it, you got to let us know so we can talk to you about it on an upcoming show. All right, so Adam, next story about Twitter spawning ad campaigns. Do you want to go first on this? You want to let me take it?
I will do it if I remember. If that's the one that we tried to do a couple weeks ago, I believe it is, right?
Yes, it is. All right, 60 seconds back on the clock. Ready and go.
So it was reported in the Wall Street Journal that it looked like Samsung Mobile had been using tweets and Twitter as a place to gain ideas for its in the line ads, when people are in the line looking like they're waiting for the iPhone, and they're kind of making fun of the fact that the Samsung's already here and it's better, and why are you sitting there being all this fanboy in a line? And it hurts my feelings because I'm an Apple fan, and same thing with you, Corey. But what they're doing is they're paying attention to the gripes and groans of Apple fans or Apple users about the iPhones, and they're actually gathering that data and using it to help them write those commercials, and sometimes even in a way take them and use them as quotes for the folks that are talking about things in line. I can see where they might have done that. One of the recent ones where they're like, the headphone jack is now at the bottom of the device. It sounded very kind of sarcastic and something that somebody might actually say on Twitter. So how might you use Twitter in order to help you find some ideas for your marketing?
All right, 60 seconds back on the clock. Ready and go. I like the concept of this, though I think that they stretched it a little bit for this post. I was like reading through it, waiting to see, they took direct quotes, and really what it was is they took an aggregate of what people were talking about and pulled a couple general themes, which, interesting, not that cool. I do like the idea, though, of, using this as inspiration and thinking to yourself, okay, outside of just running Twitter searches to get a sense for who's talking about you, maybe there's an opportunity to pull quotes and create a banner ad or a quick, online video, maybe something to run inside of LinkedIn, like we just said. I think, looking at Twitter as more than just a overall barometer for your brand, and actually as a source for usable quotes and usable verbiage and usable language, I think that that's a very interesting idea. And, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't on the large scale, but I could see this being adopted by smaller companies as well. Alrighty, last lightning round story. Here we go. Ready and start. So the last story we have is actually a new YouTube feature, and YouTube being, something that the SoLoMo puts a lot of focus into, this piqued my interest. So what they're allowing channels to do is prominently feature a video or even the channel itself in each one of their videos. So we've seen annotations before. Annotations are the little links that you can put on top of your video to make them clickable. Well, what YouTube is going to let you do is actually put a specific video on top of all of your other videos automatically. So let's say you're a company that's created a lot of YouTube videos, there's a lot of embeds going out, but you just created a new video and you want to really emphasize that. You can now automatically update all of your other videos to include this thumbnail and really promote that new content. So if you're churning out a lot of content, if YouTube is a big focus of your online marketing efforts, I think this is a great way to highlight the newest and the best content and really drive viewers in that content. All right, Adam, what's your take on the YouTube function? Do you think it's something brands could get use of, or is this really targeted at the sort of channels on YouTube that are pumping out stuff daily? Ready and go.
Well, I think if you're a brand and you're pumping stuff out daily, then definitely, if you have something that you want to link somebody to additional content, it could be intrusive. It's really hard. You'll have to take a look at the post once we link to it to really see how it is that they're doing this, and to make sure that it doesn't seem kind of intrusive. I mean, if you're, for instance, the podcast, like what we're doing, it would make sense. If you're putting out content frequently, it makes sense. If you want to use it as a way to do a tour of a product that you have in multi-pieces and you want to lead somebody to the next thing, it makes sense. It very much reminds me of doing almost like a sponsored ad on Facebook where you have your general content, but you want to pay a little so that other content you have that might be also useful and interesting to folks has a little bit more visibility. So I think we'll probably maybe experiment a little bit with it. We'll see how much it costs to do it, and test it out and see if we can get people to go from episode to episode or something with us or our clients.
Yeah, and one thing that you mentioned that they do highlight is the idea that you can not only promote your newest content, but also your previous content that may have otherwise gotten buried. So, for instance, one of our most popular shows was the Pinterest episode, but at this point, that was, early on in the show. I think that was either episode 6 or episode 8, somewhere, literally months ago. And so a lot of the newer viewers might not get exposure to that video, but this would be a chance for us to focus on that, for a week, really dedicate all of our videos to highlighting this older content and bringing it back to the forefront instead of just relying on YouTube to serve up, the latest content. So another interesting example of how that could be used. All right, so we will finish this episode off with a quick action item. And I say quick because in the time that it will take me to describe this, you could probably do it yourself. And what I'm talking about is verifying your website on Pinterest. So this is interesting, I think, and it's a smart move by Pinterest because their, other competitor in the space, Twitter, has a verification process, but it's kind of a black box. If you want to be verified, you've got to be, sort of popular, and then maybe they contact you about getting verified. Well, what Pinterest is doing is saying, hey, if you're an account and you've got a website you want to promote, we'll make it easy for you to verify that. So actually, if you go to pinterest.com/SoLoMo show and check out our account, you'll see that we have the little verified checkbox. And
we do?
We do, exactly. It took less than a minute. I kid you not. I went there. I was like, all right, let's check this out. I want to see how easy it is. It took 1 minute. I
want to go look. I'm so excited to go look now.
I could probably do it in less than a minute at this point. You go to the link that we'll include in the show notes. Those will be available at solomoshow.com. You go to this link, it takes you to a page. All you do is download a pre-formatted HTML document, upload it into your main URL. So in this case, it was, solomoshow.com/abc123.html, and then you click the verify button. They look for that file. If they see it, they say you are good to go, and they put the verified checkmark on your site. So it is a great way to verify it. You can only verify a single website, so it's really designed to verify your top-level domain. If you're a company
what's the advantage, Corey? What's the advantage?
The advantage is you can really put your branding out there and say, I am publishing on behalf of this company. So it's kind of protecting yourself, and especially useful if you're an online store or an online company that has things that people might be pinning. You can say, hey, I'm the official originator of content from this website. And so if you see something and you're wondering, is that coming from this company, or is somebody just pretending to be Bed Bath & Beyond in order to, scrape some affiliate dollars off the top? This is a way of saying, no, this is in fact Bed Bath & Beyond, or this is in fact, Susie's quilting supplies, something like that. It gives you a chance to verify that. In our case, we can say, these are pins coming from the SoLoMo show, and here's our website, and the two are connected and essentially one and the same.
So it's a little reputation management in a way.
It's a little bit of reputation management, exactly. It's protecting you from having other people pretend to be you, or, it just makes it so that if somebody comes to your site and they say, oh, I see that this person has taken the time to verify their account, they're obviously invested in Pinterest. And again, it's easy to do. It takes literally 60 seconds. So we'll include a link to how to do this in the show notes. Check it out. If you've got a Pinterest profile and you've got a website, you should definitely do this in the next week because, hey, it's easy. And, anything you can do to protect your presence online is a good step to take, assuming you are able to get this file uploaded to your website. And if you can't get that uploaded to your website, there may be other challenges you're facing. But overall, easy process, something simple to do. It gives you a nice little check mark, and it makes your Pinterest profile official. So give it the thumbs up. All right, well, we covered a lot today, but as always, we would love to hear from you because we are always interested in getting suggested topics, questions, feedback, or even just to say hi, to meet some of our audience. We had a couple of questions in the live episode, which we appreciate as well. So if you do want to get in touch with us, there's a number of ways to do so. The first of which would be through Twitter. We are both available at SoLoMo Show. That's where you can direct questions directly to the show. that we can then hopefully answer in a later episode. If you'd like to reach us directly, I'm available at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email the both of us. Our email is solomoshow@gmail.com. We do also have a Facebook page where we always seem to be forgetting to share our episodes, but we also have a lot of other things that we share over there that we see throughout the week. We hope that you guys can also get on there and chit-chat about things with each other, the other fans and listeners. We also have a Google Plus page, and we have, as we discussed, a Pinterest account that we have our different pieces of content divvied up into different boards. So go check that out and repin to your heart's delight.
All right, and all of the links that we discussed today, as well as links to the social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes. And those are available either at solomoshow.com or in the podcast player of your choosing. So if you're using a podcast player to listen to this, there should be an option to view show notes, or maybe it's called bookmarks or links. But it's basically a collection of all of the things that we have talked about. Every episode we go through, we include links. We often even include supplementary links that we didn't get a chance to talk about on the show. And it's a way for you to dive into the topics, form your own opinions, maybe research a little bit more about something we didn't get to cover as in-depth as you'd like us to go. And it's a nice little tool. It's a nice little added value if you enjoy listening to the episodes. This lets you dive a little deeper and get some additional information. So check those out, solomoshow.com. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap, and we hope that you join us next week for another great episode of The SoLoMo Show.
Take care.